This is No Operating Manual, a podcast about building healthcare companies when there's no one clear path and no operations manual. My guest today is Kristin Kelly, founder and CEO of Voyageur Health Advisory, whose career path ran through Minnesota's health insurance exchange, MNsure, and fast-growing companies like Bright Health and Firefly Health. That inside-out view of healthcare, policy to startup to scale, shapes today's conversation on growth, timing, and the lessons you only learn once. Things are already moving. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much, Erin. Happy to be here.
So let's get right into it. Voyageur Health Advisory just went through a rebrand, which can be a deceptively emotional process. What wasn't working anymore? And how did you know it was time for change?
Yeah, it's a good question. And to your point, was a little more emotional to me than I even anticipated. While I didn't come up with our original name, I sort of had grown to like it or referred to it. And it was just initially built for me. And as we moved to we really wanted a name that reflected our company and was inclusive for the team that we had and the team that we were building. And so I wanted to move from a team name that was, frankly, just my initials to a term and a brand that really reflected our wonderful talent and who we are.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad that you're able to find that and be able to move forward. So in your career, you've worked closely with Minnesota's ACA Marketplace. When new healthcare companies approach public agencies, what do they tend to misunderstand about how decisions within those agencies get made?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a big misunderstanding, not only sort of about how decisions are made, but the coordination and there being a lack of speed and innovation. I will say during my time at MNsure, I remember early on pulling an all-nighter with my boss to make sure we could get the right information, not only for MNsure, but over to the governor's office for an early morning press release. And I think the government can get sort of a bad rap for moving slowly. But when I look back over a decade later, I'm still really proud of how quickly we were able to take a piece of legislation and build something that had never before been built, which is a functioning state-based health insurance marketplace where more than 100,000 people were able to purchase their health insurance coverage in rather quick time period. You know, there were decisions that we had to make around what vendors we would use and when we would onboard and things like that. But all in all, I think, it went pretty smoothly. When something wasn't working, we could replace a vendor. And there's some standards for procurement that do take a little bit longer. But I would say, all in all, it was really awesome to be on a team that was working hard together with a common goal, even though it was also dependent and working interoperationally with other and interdependently with other organizations at the state. To date, I would say that's still one of my favorite jobs that I've ever had. And I feel really lucky to have been on the early team there.
So if you were advising as Voyageur, one of those healthcare startups that was going to engage with MNsure, what is the one thing you would just say, you make sure you get this buttoned up before you even approach?
I think it's really making sure, in particular right now, that sort of all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed in terms of sort of some of the formulaic things in terms of, carrying the right insurance and making sure all your documents are up to snuff. I think that's becoming more and more, always has been important, becoming increasingly important as government contracts to continue to get more scrutiny over time. But I think the other thing is just really having a patience, thinking through, how can we plug in? Who are the people that we need to talk to? How do we best use the process and think through, what would it be like if you were in their shoes, knowing that it's a little bit more standardized and formulaic to go through a process there. So I would say it's really just making sure that there's, kind of almost empathy on the other side for the fact that it is more of a hard-coded system, so to speak, than maybe working with an early stage, another early stage company or a VC or something that can tend to move really quickly and maybe be more flexible around some of those requirements. But before any entity is ready to go work directly with the government, I would make sure that they have any sort of a solid compliance review before going for that bid or for trying to become a secured vendor.
That's great advice. But speaking of startups, you were an early hire at Bright Health. What surprised you most about being inside an early stage startup?
Yeah. Oh, right. I have so many mixed of feelings about this experience, but I will still say to date, it's probably the best thing I've done in my career, but it did not come out with some big bumps. I think the thing that was surprising that I learned about myself through that is that I'm really an all in person. Bright Health quickly became a really big part of my life and really sort of, I felt like it defined me. The team there early worked on, long hours, but it was also people who were hired that were mission aligned, which was wonderful. I would say more than that, the people I got to work alongside of, frankly, and learn from, given it was earlier in my career, were incredible and have left a huge impact on how I think or how to level up or be creative. And I just feel really privileged to have gotten to work alongside of some of those driven and creative, talented people. I will say at times it was all consuming in a way that I did not expect. I had been in consulting before. I had worked at other payers before, and I could sometimes, leave those jobs and check in for an hour. But I would think about Bright on the way home, and I would think about it in the shower, and I would talk about it with my husband and my dad on the phone, and when I was on the treadmill, and my friends at work became my friends outside of work. And it just was really a different experience for me. And I think I would find myself checking my phone first thing in the morning eagerly and last thing at night before I went to sleep. And I think there was something really special and magnetic about it for me. But I would say ultimately between that and frankly MNsure, which I just described earlier, there was something really in that desire to build and be pre revenue or pre the action, pre turning on the button for consumers to be there, to building it and going through multiple iterations. That was really special and made me realize how much I enjoy working on public programs and the practical application of regulations and public policy and bringing those to life.
That all encompassing thing, I think, is so indicative of a startup where you just get
Yes.
consumed and you're
Yeah.
like, where did the rest of my life go?
Right.
I
It's
think a
just
lot of
one
people,
giant continuum.
yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
people can relate to that.
Yeah.
So you've seen companies from a lot of different angles. So
Yeah.
payer, provider, product growth. When teams think they're ready to go to market, what's usually the gap that they don't quite see yet?
Yeah. This is tricky. I might try and answer it from maybe two points of view, but I think a common theme that I have seen in early stage companies is that there's like a drive and willingness, which is great. That's what you want in founders and early stage companies, to deliver a new service. And they're, incredibly proud and super excited about the product that they're going to deliver. But it doesn't, what they are delivering, whether it's a care delivery or a service or a new plan, doesn't necessarily acknowledge or understand the way the service is paid for today. And while, the should not let us think, how it's done today should be the standard for innovation. I will say I do consistently see kind of a gap, as you called it, or a lack of knowledge or understanding of like where the market is today and how the company can achieve its financial goals while creating an acceptable and achievable financial story that both recognizes kind of like where the market is today, and also they're building and creating the path or the bridge to bring not only their company but the industry forward with them in order to enable and unlock the product or the service that they're building and bringing to market.
So, when you talk privately to early stage healthcare leaders, what's the hard truth that comes up again and again, whether they're ready to hear it or not?
Honestly, it's probably building on the comments I just made. I've had the pleasure of meeting and working alongside with dozens upon dozens of early stage healthcare leaders, and there is a desire, which is wonderful, to radically change components of healthcare. And don't get me wrong, I applaud and believe we need passion and innovation badly in this space. I do think, however, people are so fixated on, their service or their product line that they often will kind of forget about the ecosystem and how the company can plug into the ecosystem and help elevate the total ecosystem, or think about the different impacts. I think recognizing that the system we have is the first step to us, kind of for those in healthcare, being able to recognize where we are is the first step for us being able to build the system that we want. I think it needs to be more aligned and interoperable than it is today, and about driving down the cost of care and improving access and quality. Versus right now, I do see a lot of companies just kind of shifting the risk and shifting the cost and further fragmenting and fractionalizing the healthcare ecosystem for not only the patients, but frankly, for the providers and insurers as well. So I think, as kind of building on that, I think, that private heart truth is, well, there's a lot of great ideas in healthcare and some great, executors. It's not just thinking about sort of the silo that the company or the innovator or the leader is in, but how can they help kind of weave their solution in that a ways that sort of elevates the floor for everybody as opposed to further fractionalizing.
Kind of pushing against that a little bit, do you
Yeah.
see more early stage healthcare leaders looking for partnership? When you're trying to say, how do you fit in? It seems like
Yeah.
partnership would fit in really well to that. So tell me what you're seeing in that sense. Like how the ones that are doing it well, how are they partnering better?
I will say, in my 20 years in healthcare, the market's certainly shifting. I think for a long times, people selling into the healthcare ecosystem or part of the healthcare system really thought of the insurance carrier as the bank, or selling into the insurer, and insurers for a long time bought up and frankly rely on a lot of different partners and systems. But I think there's a new level of sort of scrutiny and financial pressures that have shifted the winds a bit in terms of how health systems and really health payers are thinking about partners. And it's really kind of, again, as opposed to necessarily shifting the risk or shifting the cost, like what are the actual ways to drive those things down or start to chip away at the core issues behind them, medical trend, et cetera. And so, and what I'm hearing is a real desire to have proof points earlier and think about more cohesive partnerships that bring together, within a certain, whether it's certain, geographic area or a certain part of the ecosystem, having there be more connectability and more stakeholders at the table to be able to make a more fruitful and cohesive partnership.
That makes absolute sense. Speaking of partnerships, so
Yeah.
you are a consulting firm
Yes.
and work with not just the health systems and the insurers, the payers, again, across the spectrum, including those early stage healthcare leaders.
Yeah.
What is one piece of advice, or actually, let's reframe this. What does a good early stage healthcare partnership look like with Voyager?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. One of the things that we're looking for in a partnership, and we hope our clients are too, is really actually being seen like an extension of a team. We are not a staffing firm. There's a lot of great fractional staffing firms out there, but we're looking to make our clients' lives easier during hard times, and we want to be part of the transformational change and support them during these changes. And so we like to have a team based approach to that type of partnership. And so while I may be the lead, just if, on a client, you're getting the whole bench of talent behind my partnership. Or if it's, my partner, Justin, is the lead, or Bruce, or anybody else on our team, being able to access the total suite of talent that we have here as part of that engagement. And so, as opposed to having to, bring in an actuarial firm or bring in someone to help think about product market fit, we have a lot of that talent on staff and on our bench. And we want to be an extension and help bring solutions and cohesive solutions to our clients. So we're really looking to find our ideal partner is someone who's looking for that type of partnership to build out an extension of their team, to have a team that supports them during a big transitional, as opposed to individually wanting to staff out certain positions or thinking about things in 3-week increments. We're really in it for the long-term impact and want to help we select and work with clients, and hopefully they're looking to us for this, but that want to make real long impact and sustainability for the long term.
Well, that sounds like a great mission and goal. And we'll go ahead and leave it at that. Thank you, Kristen, for
Yeah.
taking the time and sharing your wisdom And we look forward to hearing more from Voyageur.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thanks for listening to No Operating Manual. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please leave a rating and a review, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. No Operating Manual is hosted and produced by Erin O'Brien of Chemistry, a healthcare marketing and communication advisory. Visit our website at choosechemistry.com.